I finally had my chance to interview Christo, and I completely messed it up. I guess. Sorry, man. I feel so nervous here. Hey guys, hope you're well. I am excited and definitely a little nervous of putting this video out. And I've been on this journey of working on my personal brand and showing who I am authentically and being very vulnerable. So this is a little disclaimer. This video isn't much about design, but more so it's a story of how I went fishing with Chris Do and 19 other creatives and some of the lessons and insights I've learned. So if you're not interested in that, I'll save you the time and, suggest that you just skip this video onto other stuff. But if you're interested and you want to know about the trip, stick around. Okay, so I went on a fishing trip with Christo, organized a few months ago, and it was an invitation to spend 5 days in the Canadian wilderness off the coast of British Columbia with 20 other creatives and entrepreneurs. Now, for context, Webflow had recently made a strategic restructuring, and sadly, my role at the company had been impacted, and I totally respect their decision. I still love them. I know it's a business. They got to make the hard decision. And so needless to say, I was going through a transitional phase in my career, and I was trying to reinvent myself. I wasn't sure if I should apply for more jobs or maybe I should just double down and pour into my brand, The Digital Third. So when this happened, Chris announced on Instagram that he was coming in my neck of the woods to go fishing. And so I saw this as a sign and an opportunity to get that clarity. And so I put down the deposit, and a few weeks later, everyone flew into Vancouver. We met, we hopped on a small plane and flew out to a remote fishing lodge where we would learn to fish for salmon, cod, and halibut. Now, this is the hilarious thing. The fishing lodge is used to having loggers, blue-collar people coming in as regular customers. I'm pretty sure this was the first time they've hosted a bunch of creatives who've never fished before. So talk about fish out of water. And this is pretty much the theme of the trip, is to get out of your comfort zone, stretch yourself, try something new, explore the unknown, and fumble through attempts. And overall, it was an amazing time. And I want to share some insights and important lessons that I learned from the trip that I'll be applying in the future and in my career, and hopefully it applies to you and your journey as well. So day one, Chris taught us how to fish. Because of course, not only is he a master in design, but he's a seasoned fisherman too. Go figure, right? He's been fishing since he was a kid. And by the end of the trip, we all learned, and everyone except for one person caught a fish on their own. Chris referenced fishing as an analogy for marketing and sales in terms of positioning the boat, using the right bait, reeling in fish or client is similar to how we position ourselves with branding, offering the right services and products as bait, and knowing when and how to close a contract, which is like, how to bring the fish in the boat on time. So all that. And as simple as that analogy is, it actually really helped put in perspective how we operate and how we navigate ourselves in the creative industry. So this leads me to my next lesson, which is surrender and being present. When we're out in the water, we'd wake up at 6 a.m. and we'd be out there fishing 6 hours at a time. And it was on. We all wanted to catch. We all wanted to get the clients, there was pressure. So early on the trip, I was in the boat with my fishing buddy, Phil, and we would be circling back and forth for hours in the area trying to get a bite, but we would see no action. And we had boats around us. We would see other people catch fish, and the pressure to catch something was a lot. It was pretty stressful. So after many hours of attempts to try to get a bite, we just decided to just let it go, to let go of the need to catch something. And at that point, we just started talking about life and sharing and talk about what was important. And then that's when something magical happened. We were getting deep in conversation, and I started to talk about God, which was, something that's a big part of my life.
Then, beyond any kind of explanation, whales and tails, and it's going on around. We're like, there's one, there's two, and I'm like, we are surrounded, and I'm pulling in a fish, and we're talking about surrender. This is the epitome. This is happening now.
Then shortly after, both our rods grabbed a bite at the same time. It was crazy.
And here we are again. Like, you were an animal, dude. I was like, I'm not gonna be able to help you like with a net right now. I'm pulling this thing in, and he's just like pulls his fish in, slams it down. All right, I'm gonna be your net man, and he was awesome.
It's the Asians in this
Crushes it.
So what's the lesson? The moment you surrender and stop chasing for outcomes, magical things happen. And that theme of surrender and not forcing an outcome became the theme of the whole trip. Like, one thing I noticed about the people on the trip was that nobody really talked about work. You'd think that if you had 5 dedicated days alone with Chris and other entrepreneurs, you'd take advantage of the time and talk about business and design. But instead, we actually just got to know each other on a human level without the pretense of a brand or a title or a status. And I think, to me, this was the clarity that I was looking for. And I think it's the most important lesson that I'll carry on throughout my career, which is really just to be real and present and just show up authentically as myself, and not to try to be more than who I am or less than that, or even try to create an image to look good or just be a certain way. Of course, we all know this and it makes sense, but easier said than done. So this leads me to my next story. So I ended up bringing my podcast gear because, come on, how can I not pass up an opportunity to interview Chris? He's an icon in the design industry, easily over a decade. And even now, I can see that he's reaching new heights. He's reaching larger audiences. If I don't get on this opportunity now, I may never in the future. So for context, prior to me switching careers, in my past life, I was an engineer for 7 years, working in the mining industry and high-rise residential construction industry. I was living off of drill rigs. I was nerding out on Excel, number crunching. I knew nothing about branding, websites, strategy, marketing, sales, nothing. And so when I got into the design space, I found out about Chris and the future, and I discovered I can have success outside of being an engineer, accountant, lawyer, doctor. Asians, you guys know what I'm talking about. Chris he gave me hope, and he gave me permission to pursue this new direction of my career. And so from that point, he was my hero. And so coming back to the fishing trip, I brought my podcasting gear, and I was bold enough to ask him for an interview, and he said yes. So this was it. And I finally had my chance to interview Christo, and I completely messed it up. I mean, of all the interviews I've done, and I've done quite a few already, this was the one that I bombed the most. I didn't have questions prepared. I couldn't think clearly. The intro is so cringe, and I couldn't even complete sentences. It was a hot mess, and I think I know why. It was because I was coming back to surrendering and forcing an outcome. I was partially trying to force an outcome, making sure that it was perfect. You know, this is my one and only chance, and it ended up being like one of the worst interviews I've done from my point of view. You know, according to my standards, I dropped the ball big time as an interviewer, but despite that, I'm just so grateful for it. Looking back at where I started with no experience and knowledge in the industry, and to recently have the opportunity to have a one-on-one conversation with Chris and be vulnerable about my faith, which is super important to me, and to share that with Chris, to me, I think that was a huge milestone to acknowledge. So I'm very grateful for even messing it up. And the other thing I learned is, I think when you want to do something new and it's worthwhile, you're probably going to look bad and you're going to fail along the way. And that's totally okay. You know, I had to imagine in my head, and I rehearsed how it would go, and it would be like perfect. But, you know, reality is it normally doesn't go the way you planned it. Can you share with me I guess, sorry, man, I feel so nervous here.
You got this.
Yeah. Knowing what to do is one thing, but actually doing it is totally another thing. And so what I learned is just putting in the reps and improving along the way. And I think, you know, forgetting about perfection, just shoot your shot, take your chances. And I'm even now I'm reflecting back, and I'm trying to think, I should have done this, I should have done that. But you know what? At the end of the day, I'm glad I did it, and I can move on And that's it. That is progress. And so that's basically what sums up, you know, the lessons that I've learned from this fishing trip. I made some amazing friends there. Too many names to mention, but you know, I had so much clarity in how to reinvent myself going forward. I'm definitely going to be sharing some of those conversations on future episodes. So if you're still watching at this point, I just want to say thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope you got some value from it. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And that's all I got. So until next time, guys, have an amazing day. Bye-bye.